The silver tray struck marble, and Luca smiled before the first glass stopped spinning. I stood beneath the carved archway of the Moretti estate with my employment papers still warm in my hand, watching crystal scatter across the grand hall like chips of ice. The chandelier poured white light over everything. The black-veined floor, the dark walnut staircase, the polished shoes of servants who had learned not to move. An elderly maid stood at the center of the wreckage. Coffee soaked through her gray uniform, filling the air with the bitter smell of roasted beans. Her name tag read MRS. Bell. One of her hands trembled against her apron. The other carried a thin red mark where the tray had slipped. Except it had not slipped. I had seen Luca Moretti hook the leg of a mahogany side table with his shoe and push it into her path. He looked no older than 16, dressed in a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His face was smooth, composed, almost bored. "Look what you did," he said. Mrs. Bell's mouth opened, but only a shallow breath came out. Around us, the servants stared at the walls. A clock ticked above the fireplace. Somewhere deeper inside the mansion, a door closed with the soft finality of a vault. "I'm sorry, young sir." She lowered herself carefully, her knees cracking against the marble. "I'll clean it." Luca nudged a shard toward her bare fingers. Every piece. Tears gathered along her lower lashes. She reached down. No one stopped her. Then Vittorio Moretti descended the staircase. The room changed before he spoke. His black suit absorbed the chandelier's light, and the quiet click of his cuff links sounded louder than the clock. Two men in dark coats waited behind him, motionless beside the banister. Vittorio surveyed the broken crystal, his son's faint smile, and the woman kneeling at their feet. For 1 second, I expected him to ask what had happened. Instead, he looked at Mrs. Bell. "You're dismissed." Her hand froze above the glass. "Mr. Moretti, please. I've served this family for 11 years. Then you understand why carelessness cannot become a habit." His voice remained low, controlled. That made it colder. "Mrs." Bell pressed her lips together, but a tear escaped and struck the marble beside the coffee. Luca watched it fall. He had wanted that tear. Vittorio had given him the victory and called it order. "Collect your wages from the office," he said. "Leave before dinner." Mrs. Bell bent toward the shards again, perhaps from duty, perhaps because humiliation had made standing impossible. I set my papers on an ivory console and crossed the hall. My shoes clicked through the silence. Every face turned toward me as I knelt beside her. The marble was cold through my skirt. Coffee warmed my fingertips as I lifted the largest shard by its blunt edge and placed it on the ruined tray. "You don't work here yet," Luca said. I met Mrs. Bell's eyes first. "Let me help you stand." She gripped my forearm. Her palm was rough from years of bleach, hot water, and work no one noticed until it stopped being done. When she was steady, I picked up the remaining pieces one by one. Luca stepped closer. His shadow covered my hands. I said she had to do it. I placed the final shard on the tray and rose. "She no longer works here," I said. "Your father made that clear." A servant near the staircase inhaled sharply. Vittorio studied me as if my name had become a question. "Who are you?" "Elena, the new maid." I retrieved my papers and offered them to him. The edges were damp with spilled coffee. "Assuming the position is still available." Luca's gaze moved from my clean, dry eyes to Mrs. Bell leaning on my arm. The smile vanished from his face, not because I had defeated him, but because I had denied him what he expected. Another maid had entered his house. This one had seen exactly what he was, and I had not cried. Morning light spilled through the tall kitchen windows, turning the copper pans amber and exposing every speck of flour on the black stone counters. The room smelled of coffee, lemon polish, and bread cooling on wire racks when Elena entered in a fresh gray uniform. A ceramic cup skidded across the island and stopped against her hand. Luca sat on the counter, one polished shoe resting on a cutting board. "Mrs. Bell lasted 11 years, he said. "You won't last 7 days." Elena moved the cutting board away from his heel and poured coffee without answering. His eyes narrowed. Silence was not the surrender he had ordered. Luca tipped a pitcher with 2 fingers. Cold chocolate spread across the counter, poured over the edge, and soaked the front of Elena's uniform in a dark, sticky sheet. The pitcher struck stone with a hollow knock. 2 maids near the pantry went still. Luca watched Elena's face with the concentration of someone waiting for a lock to break. "That looks better on you," he said. It reminds everyone what you are. Chocolate dripped from Elena's cuff onto the pale tile. She set the coffee pot down gently. No plea came. No insult returned. Instead, she took a linen towel from a drawer, placed it beside the spreading puddle, and slid the pitcher toward him. Clean it. A refrigerator motor hummed in the sudden quiet. Luca gave a short laugh. You clean. I make messes. Not this one. Elena unfastened her stained apron and folded it so the wet fabric would not touch the counter. If I clean it for you, I teach you that cruelty creates servants. If you clean it, you learn it only creates work. Heat climbed into Luca's cheeks. I can have you fired. You can ask your father. Her voice remained level. But until he dismisses me, I will do my job. Humiliation is not part of it. One of the maids lowered her gaze to hide the beginning of a smile. Luca saw it. His hand closed around the pitcher, but Elena did not step back. That refusal cost her the only certainty she had in the Moretti estate, employment. Yet she stood beneath the hard white light with chocolate cooling against her skin and waited. Luca jumped down. For several seconds, his shoes remained inches from the puddle. Then he seized the towel and dragged it across the floor with one furious stroke. The cloth darkened in his fist. Elena pointed to the stain beneath the cabinet. You missed a spot. The maids held their breath. Luca crouched again. His movements were sharp, careless at first, then slower when the liquid smeared instead of disappearing. By the time the tile shone, his sleeves were damp and his knuckles smelled of cocoa and disinfectant. Elena handed him the pitcher. The sink is behind you. He rinsed it beneath steaming water. For the first time, Luca Moretti had caused harm and remained in the room long enough to remove it. When he turned, Elena had changed into a spare apron. Her eyes were dry, her posture unchanged. He had threatened her place in the house, stained her clothing, and displayed her before the staff. Still, she had made him obey without raising her voice. Luca set the pitcher down too hard. 7 days, he said. Then you'll beg to leave. Elena picked up the coffee pot. If you need 7 days to prove you're cruel, you must not be as powerful as you think. The words stopped him at the doorway. His fingers tightened around the brass handle, and a colder idea entered his face. Tomorrow, he said. Let's see how brave you are when no one can hear you. The door swung shut behind him. This time, Elena had not merely denied Luca his tears. She had taken control of the consequence, and he had decided the next test would have walls around it. The west corridor held the chill of a sealed crypt, smelling of beeswax, old roses, and rain trapped behind stone. At its end, a brass key turned with a quiet click. Elena looked back as Luca withdrew it from the lock, his face divided by the amber wall lamps. Let's see how long that courage lasts, he said through the door. His footsteps retreated across the marble, leaving her inside a room where the air had not moved in years. Pale curtains covered the windows. A silver-backed brush rested beside a perfume bottle filled with dust, and a woman's portrait faced the bed. Dark hair, steady eyes, one hand resting on a much younger Luca's shoulder. Elena tried the handle once. Locked. She could have shouted. Instead, she drew the curtains apart. Rain scratched the glass, and gray daylight exposed dozens of envelopes inside a writing desk whose lid stood slightly open. None carried stamps. Each was addressed in the same graceful hand, "My dearest Luca." Elena did not unfold them. The dates were enough. One for his 8th birthday, another for Christmas, another marked for the day you believe I chose to leave. Some had been torn across the middle and carefully pressed flat again. Beneath them lay a child's wooden horse with one wheel missing. The room was not merely a prison Luca had chosen for her. It was the wound he had preserved. Outside, Luca waited in the cold corridor with the key clenched against his palm. No servant had lasted long after entering his mother's room. One had screamed. Another had pounded the door until her knuckles bruised. Their panic had always given him something simple to despise. But from behind the oak came only the measured slide of a drawer closing. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The silence began pressing back against him. Luca unlocked the door and pushed it inward. Had enough? Elena stood beside the desk, the unopened letters aligned beneath her fingertips. Dust silvered one sleeve of her spare apron. You went through her things. His voice cracked against the walls. He strode forward and seized the top envelope. This time Elena stepped away, leaving him to decide whether to tear it or hold it. I read no words, she said. I read dates. You know nothing about her. I know you locked me in the last place where you remember being loved. His fingers crushed the envelope's edge. Rainwater rattled in the gutter outside, and the portrait watched over the space between them. She said she would come back, Luca whispered. She didn't. Elena reached the doorway, but Luca planted himself before it, no longer smiling. So now you pity me? No. Her gaze remained level. Pain does not give you the right to hurt other people. The sentence landed without heat, leaving him no anger to fight. Elena opened her palm. He still held the key, and for the first time, the choice to keep someone trapped looked small in his hand. His grip loosened. The brass key dropped into her palm. Elena stepped into the corridor under her own power. Behind her, Luca remained beside the letters, staring at the years written across their sealed fronts. Tomorrow, she said, you can decide whether this door stays locked because you are cruel or because you are afraid. The latch remained open, and Luca could no longer pretend those were the same thing. By 6 o'clock, the long dining table glowed beneath 12 crystal chandeliers, but not a single serving cart crossed the polished floor. Silver lids remained cold in the kitchen. The only sounds were the slow ticking of the grandfather clock and the faint hiss of rain against the windows. Luca entered expecting chairs to straighten and servants to lower their eyes. Instead, he found one place setting, an empty water glass, and Elena standing beside the closed dining room doors. Where is everyone? He demanded. Working, Elena said. Just not for you today. That morning, she had spoken to each member of the household staff. No one would cook for Luca, carry his coat, clean his room, or absorb his insults for 24 hours. His prescribed medication waited beside a sealed bottle of water. The security detail remained outside. Emergency food sat clearly labeled in the refrigerator. Elena had removed obedience, not safety. Luca struck the service bell. Its brass note rang through the corridor, sharp enough to startle dust from the carved molding. No footsteps answered. He rang again. Nothing. You ordered them to disobey me. I asked them whether they wished to serve someone who made them afraid to enter a room. Elena opened the doors. Beyond them, the corridor stretched empty under amber wall lamps. They answered for themselves. Luca marched into the kitchen, where the warm smell of rosemary chicken filled the air. The staff sat at the oak work table sharing dinner. Mrs. Alvarez, the cook, kept one hand around her coffee mug. A young houseman who had once apologized for breathing too loudly did not rise. No one insulted Luca. No one even smiled. Their silence gave him nothing to punish without exposing exactly what he had become. Get up, Luca said. The chairs remained still. Elena placed a plate, a skillet, and a wooden spoon on the counter. Your ingredients are ready. I don't cook. Then tonight you don't eat. His eyes swept across the faces that had once scattered at his approach. My father owns this house. Your father pays their wages, Elena replied. He does not own their dignity. Luca seized the skillet, but the heavy iron dragged his wrist downward. Oil snapped when he set it over the flame. 10 minutes later, the egg on his plate was burned at the edges and raw in the center. He stood alone at the dining table, breathing smoke and scorched butter, while the untouched service bell gleamed beside him. The emptiness was no longer a weapon he controlled. Near midnight, Vittorio Moretti summoned Elena to his study. Firelight crawled across the mahogany walls, and cigar smoke hung beneath the green banker's lamp. Luca stood near the window, his shirt cuff stained with grease. You organized a rebellion under my roof, Vittorio said. I organized a consequence. The order of this household is not yours to rewrite. Elena set the service bell on his desk. Its base touched the wood with a quiet, final click. Then restore your order. Command them to fear him again. Luca looked toward his father, waiting for the machinery of the Moretti name to move on his behalf. Vittorio's jaw tightened. You will never instruct my staff to withhold service again. Then give them another way to say no. Careful, Elena. His voice dropped, cold and measured. You are challenging more than my son. You are challenging me. Yes, Mr. Moretti. The clock struck midnight. From the doorway came the soft scrape of shoes as the staff returned to duty, not because Luca had defeated them, but because the day Elena promised had ended. Vittorio leaned forward, his ring flashing in the firelight. One more disruption, and you leave this estate. Elena held his gaze. Across the room, Luca stared at the bell no one had answered, and understood that the next choice might cost her the home he had tried to drive her from. Thunder rolled over the Moretti estate hard enough to tremble the window panes, and then every chandelier went black. The air conditioning died with a low mechanical sigh. Rain hammered the slate roof while emergency lights flickered once along the corridor and vanished, leaving only the smell of hot wax and damp stone. Elena had reached the west stairwell when a crash sounded above her, followed by a breath dragged sharply through clenched teeth. Luca. No answer came. She found him beside a fallen silver candelabrum, one hand locked around the banister. Lightning flashed through the tall windows, whitening his face for an instant. "Get the backup lights," he ordered. The generator failed. Elena took a brass storm lantern from the wall cabinet, struck a match, and adjusted the wick until amber lights spread across the marble. Then she placed the lantern in Luca's hand. His fingers tightened around its warm handle. "What are you doing? You know this house better than I do." Wind groaned inside the chimney. "Lead us downstairs." "You lead." No, her voice remained level. "I won't leave you here, but I won't teach you that fear makes you helpless." Another thunderclap split overhead. Luca flinched, spilling light across the portraits. Elena did not touch him or soften the silence with pity. She merely waited. At last, he lifted the lantern. "Stay close." Luca moved first. He tested each step before shifting his weight, shielding the flame whenever cold air pushed through the corridor. At the landing, a fallen branch pressed against the glass doors, forcing him to choose the servants' passage instead. The narrow hallway smelled of linen starch and old cedar. Pipes clicked behind the walls. When Elena paused at an unfamiliar turn, Luca doubled back, raised the lantern, and guided her around a loose floorboard. For once, he was not issuing a command to cause discomfort. He was responsible for someone besides himself. They reached the old pantry, where thick walls muted the storm. Luca set the lantern on a wooden table, but his hand remained around its handle. "The lights went out the night she left," he said. Elena waited across from him. "My mother promised she would come back before morning." His thumb scraped soot from the brass. "They told me she died before she could." Rain rattled against the small window. After that, every time someone cried, I knew I wasn't the weakest person in the room. The confession hung between them, bare and ugly. Elena slid the lantern back toward him when its flame guttered. "Then keep it burning." Luca adjusted the wick himself. "You're not going to tell me I was only hurting?" "You were hurting," Elena said. "And you still chose where to put that hurt." His eyes dropped to the circle of light. "Can someone stop choosing it?" "Yes, but apologies are words. The next person you could humiliate will be the test." A generator coughed somewhere below. Light returned beneath the pantry door in a thin white line, yet Luca did not move. "Mrs. Alvarez," he whispered. "I made her kneel over broken glass." His jaw tightened, as if the name itself cut deeper than the shards had. When the door opened, Elena stepped aside rather than leading him through it. Luca picked up the lantern and walked out first. At the top of the servants' stairs, he stopped and looked back. "Tomorrow, I'm going to ask her to come here." His grip steadied. "Not so she can forgive me, so I can face what I did." For the first time, Elena heard no threat in his voice, only the cost of a choice he could no longer make someone else carry. Outside, the storm continued, but Luca carried the light. By dawn, rainwater still crawled down the tall library windows, bending the gray light across shelves that smelled of leather and cold ash. Elena entered to return the storm lantern and found Silas Kane feeding papers into the fireplace. One envelope slipped from his gloved hand and landed short of the flames. The faded handwriting across its face stopped her. For Luca, when he is old enough to hear the truth. Silas's polished shoe covered it. "Some grief is more useful unopened," he said. Elena looked past him to the iron document box on the desk. Its lid stood open, revealing correspondence bound with the same blue ribbon she had seen in Luca's mother's room. Silas lifted the envelope, but Elena caught his wrist before it reached the fire. Wax cracked beneath his fingers. "You kept her last letter." His smile did not move his eyes. "I preserved the heir his father needed." The fire popped, throwing orange light across his silver cufflinks. Silas explained it without shame. A boy who believed his mother had abandoned him was easier to harden, easier to isolate, easier to guide toward the empire Silas expected one day to control through him. Elena released his wrist and took the envelope. "Put that back," he said, "or you will leave this house as a thief." 10 minutes later, Elena placed the letter, the document box ledger, and Silas's duplicate key on Vittorio Moretti's mahogany desk. Morning light flashed along the boss's black signet ring while the clock behind him counted each second. Silas withheld this from your son, Elena said. Luca's cruelty grew around a lie someone kept feeding. Vittorio read the ledger entry twice. His jaw locked, but before he could summon anyone, the study doors opened. Silas entered with 2 security men carrying Elena's canvas bag. Silver cutlery and a diamond brooch spilled onto the carpet with a hard metallic clatter. Found in her quarters, Silas said. Elena did not look at the planted objects. Her eyes remained on Vittorio. Check the cameras. Check every key. Silas calmly reminded him that the West Servants' Corridor had lost surveillance during the storm, and that public doubt inside the Moretti household invited challenges from every employee beneath its roof. Vittorio's fingers closed around the letter. To expose Silas immediately without proof would fracture the authority he had built on certainty. To keep Elena near the evidence would place her within Silas's reach. Footsteps sounded outside. Luca appeared in the doorway, still holding the lantern, its brass handle cold against his palm. What did she find? Vittorio rose. His chair scraped the marble like a blade being drawn. Elena stole from this house, Silas answered. No, Elena said quietly. I told the truth inside it. Vittorio's gaze moved from the hidden letter to his son, then back to the woman who had risked her livelihood to place both before him. When he spoke, his voice was controlled enough to chill the room. Elena, you are dismissed. Effective immediately, Luca stepped forward. Father, not one word. A guard lifted Elena's bag. She removed her white apron, folded it once, and laid it beside the brooch. No plea, no accusation. At the threshold, she met Luca's eyes. Change is what you do when telling the truth costs you something. The doors closed behind her with a deep wooden boom. Luca turned toward Silas. The older man wore the faint smile of someone who believed the lie had survived. Then Luca saw the corner of his mother's envelope beneath Vittorio's hand, and understood that Elena had just lost her place in the house to give him the one thing everyone else had denied him. The truth. This time, Luca did not cry. He tightened his grip on the lantern and stared directly at Silas. Open that letter. The grandfather clock struck once, its brass note rolling through the study while rain ticked against the black windows. Vittorio's hand remained over the cream-colored envelope, but Luca set the storm lantern on the desk and turned its wick higher. Amber light caught the broken wax seal, and the edge of a dark fiber pressed beneath it. That isn't Father's seal, Luca said. Silas's faint smile vanished. Vittorio lifted his hand. The envelope had been opened and closed again with black sealing wax, the same wax Silas used on household inventories. Luca crossed to the ledger Elena had surrendered before her dismissal. Its damp leather smelled of smoke, and several pages were wrinkled from the storm. He did not search for another secret. He matched what was already in front of them. The date written across his mother's envelope, the entry recording its arrival, and Silas Kane's initials beside the words private correspondence, held by order. Whose order? Luca asked. Silas straightened his silver cufflinks. Your father's household required stability. That wasn't my question. Luca pushed the ledger across the polished mahogany. The paper rasped beneath his palm. Whose order? Silence tightened around the room. Vittorio studied the entry, then looked at his head butler. Not mine. Silas's jaw shifted. For years, he had guided Luca's anger towards servants, tutors, anyone too powerless to answer back. A furious heir depended on the man who taught him where to aim. Your mother wanted to weaken you, Silas said at last. She wanted you removed from everything your father built. I preserved your inheritance. Luca stepped between Silas and the letter. This was no longer a boy demanding service. You preserved your influence. Silas reached for the envelope, but Luca took it first. The brittle paper crackled in his grip. Vittorio could have ordered him to surrender it. Instead, the Mafia boss slowly withdrew his hand from the desk. Luca broke the false seal. His mother's handwriting leaned across the page in faded blue ink. He read aloud, his voice unsteady only once. Vittorio, take our son away from this life before cruelty becomes the only language he knows. Tell Luca I did not leave him. I was trying to give him a future where he would never need to make another person afraid. The rain seemed to recede beyond the thick walls. Heat from the lantern touched Luca's knuckles, but his fingers had gone white around the page. There had been no abandonment, no final rejection. The wound he had used like permission had been kept open by design. On the desk lay Elena's folded apron beside the planted brooch, one clean square of white cloth against cold diamonds. She had allowed guards to carry her bag through the hall. She had accepted the word thief without begging. Also, this letter could remain where Luca might see it. Silas moved toward the door. Luca's voice stopped him. "You stay." The command was quiet, stripped of the delight he once took in making others flinch. He placed the letter before Vittorio, then turned the ledger so Silas's initials faced upward. "You made me believe pain was power." Elena lost her job, proving it wasn't. Vittorio's face hardened into the expression that had ended negotiations across the city. "Luca, what are you asking me to do?" Luca looked at the apron, then at the man who had shaped his grief into a weapon. For the first time, the Moretti heir understood that truth alone would change nothing unless he was willing to surrender what the lie had given him. "I'm not asking," he said, "and I won't inherit this family under Silas Kane's rules." Rain pressed silver fingers against the study windows, and the fire snapped behind its iron grate, filling the room with cedar smoke and dry heat. "Then choose," Vittorio said. His palm rested beside the recovered letter, but his eyes remained on Luca. "Silas is finished here. What happens next belongs to you." Luca stepped away from the desk. At 16, he had already learned how Moretti men occupied a room. Chin raised, voice sharpened, everyone else forced to wait. Tonight, he crossed the Persian rug without borrowing any of those weapons. Silas Kane stood by the locked door, his black coat immaculate despite the sweat darkening his collar. "You are upset," Silas said. "By morning, you will understand that an heir cannot survive on a maid's sentiment." Luca stopped before him. "Elena didn't ask me to become sentimental." The sealed windows trembled beneath a roll of thunder. "She asked me to become responsible." Silas glanced toward Vittorio. "Sir, the boy is grieving. Let me correct this before he damages the family." Vittorio did not answer him. Instead, he opened a drawer and removed the Moretti signet ring, the heavy gold seal reserved for the future head of the household. He placed it on the desk with a dull metallic click. "Your inheritance," Vittorio told Luca, "comes with authority over this estate. Accept the ring, and Silas leaves quietly. The household returns to order." Luca looked at the crest carved into the gold. That ring meant protection, wealth, and a name that made powerful men lower their voices. It also carried the silence that had dismissed Mrs. Alvarez, condemned Elena as a thief, and taught every servant that dignity could be sacrificed for convenience. "No," the word landed softly. Vittorio's fingers tightened against the desk. Luca removed the silver heir's pin from his lapel and set it beside the ring. "I won't accept authority built on people being too frightened to refuse me. Clear Elena's name in front of every employee who watched her leave. Give every worker the right to report abuse without losing a paycheck. Pay Mrs. Alvarez everything she was denied." Silas gave a brittle laugh. "And when they stop fearing you, what exactly will remain?" Luca turned toward him. "A choice." He crossed to the bell cord and pulled it once. Its chime traveled through the sleeping mansion, bright and unfamiliar. Two guards entered, rainwater shining on their shoulders. Luca did not order them to hurt Silas. He instructed them to escort the former head butler from the staff wing, remove his keys, and preserve every household record for Vittorio's review. Silas's face lost its practiced stillness. "You cannot cast aside the man who prepared you to rule." "You prepared me to repeat you," Luca replied. "That ends tonight." When the door closed behind Silas, the study seemed larger. Only the rain and the hiss of burning would remain. Vittorio studied the heir's pin on the desk. "If I grant your demands, every captain in this city will hear that my son rejected the Moretti inheritance." Luca slid the gold ring back toward his father. "Then let them hear why." For several seconds, Vittorio said nothing. He finally took the ring, not as a gift withdrawn, but as a debt returned. "The staff will assemble at 8, he said. "Elena's name will be cleared. The new protections will be written before noon." Luca picked up Elena's folded apron. Its cotton was cool and coarse beneath his fingers, the pocket still creased where she had carried her keys. "Send a car for her." Vittorio shook his head. "No. You dismissed her with your cruelty long before I dismissed her with my words." If you want her back, you will go yourself. Dawn was beginning to pale the windows when Luca reached for his coat. Behind him waited the estate he had refused to inherit unchanged. Ahead waited Mrs. Alvarez, Elena, and the possibility that neither woman would forgive him. This time, Luca opened the door without commanding anyone to follow. Cold morning air slipped beneath the door of a narrow brick apartment, carrying the smell of wet pavement and chimney smoke. 3 measured knocks sounded through the quiet. Elena opened the door to find Luca Moretti alone on the landing, his black coat darkened by rain, her folded apron resting across his palms. Mrs. Alvarez stood several feet behind her, one hand gripping the back of a wooden chair. Luca did not enter. "Silas Kane has been removed," he said. "Your name was cleared before every employee. My father has ordered full restitution, but the apology is mine." He placed an envelope containing Mrs. Alvarez's wages on the small table beside the door, then lowered himself to his knees on the cold tile. From his coat pocket, he removed a cloth-wrapped bundle. The broken pieces of her serving tray lay inside, each shard cleaned and carefully fitted together with thin seams of gold. "I made you pick up glass while you were crying," Lucas said. "I thought power meant never having to bend down." His voice caught against the hiss of the radiator. "I was wrong." Mrs. Alvarez studied him beneath the amber hallway light. "Money pays a debt," she said. "It does not repair trust." "I know." Luca kept his eyes lowered. "You owe me nothing. Not forgiveness, not silence, not another chance." She accepted the envelope, but left the repaired tray untouched. That boundary remained hers to keep. Elena's fingers closed around the apron, feeling its coarse cotton and the familiar ridge of each stitched pocket. Luca rose, but he did not ask her to return. Instead, he handed her a second document bearing Vittorio's signature. Written protections for every Moretti employee, the right to report abuse without dismissal, and compensation for anyone Luca had driven away. "I surrendered my heir's pin until these rules are real," he said. "If you never come back, they still remain." Elena read every line while rain ticked softly against the window. Then she set the document down. "Why are you here, Luca?" "To face what I did." "And tomorrow?" His hand tightened around the empty place on his lapel where the pin had been. "Tomorrow I begin repairing it, whether anyone praises me or not." Mrs. Alvarez moved first. She lifted the cloth bundle and placed it in his hands. "Then start by carrying what you broke." Luca nodded. No command, no protest. Elena stepped into the hall and locked the apartment behind her. She did not put on the apron. She carried it over one arm as they returned to the estate, not as a uniform forced upon her, but as work she had freely chosen under terms Luca had paid to change. At 8 o'clock, every employee waited beneath the chandeliers of the Moretti Great Hall. Vittorio stood near the staircase, silent and severe. Luca crossed the marble floor holding the mended tray. Before the same household that had once watched Mrs. Alvarez weep, he apologized to each worker by name. Then he took an ordinary service cloth, knelt beside a muddy footprint near the entrance, and wiped it away himself. No one laughed. Elena approached and offered him her hand. Not absolution, but permission to stand. Luca accepted it without pulling her down or using it to raise himself above anyone else. The room went silent. The boy who had made every maid cry had finally learned that a heart does not change when it is forgiven. It changes when it chooses never to cause those tears again.